Resume there. Okay, so this is Cisco Packet Tracer software, right? We're saying this is a simulation software that we use to simulate what exactly is happening on the real world, right? Like let's say you building your own network. These are the types of routers or devices, Cisco devices that we are going to be working with or working on, right, in a real network. So now we're using Packet Tracer because Bongega is not in class, so we can't use the actual devices that we have here. Because if I use the routers that I have in class here to connect to them, I need to disconnect from the network that I'm using here, of which and then connect to a different one, of which that one doesn't have internet, right? Because it's not connected to the internet. So I won't be able to stream this online, right? So that's why we're using the simulator for now. So when we're building a network, right, the first devices or the first device that we will need so that our people can access the internet, it will be a router, right? So that was the first device that we're going to buy, a router. Even when we're building your small network at home, the first thing that we buy is what? A router, which provides us with the network access, right? And then now in the other name for the router in the network environment, we call it a gateway, right? So you hear like most of engineers, you hear a lot of engineers calling a router what? A gateway, because it is the one that takes you out of from your network to other networks, right? So it's a gateway. So the name is what is the gateway. So now on this packet tracer, if you want to add any device, what you do is you see here on this side, we have network devices. So all of the network devices, you can find them. Click here, and then you find them here, right? So you have an icon for the router, and then if I want a switch, you can click on the switch there. And then if I want a different device, which one? This one is what? The hubs, right? But the hubs, no company use hubs anymore, right? Because the hubs, what they used to do was if they receive a packet or a frame coming from different devices, they will just broadcast the entire information, which like it did take much of our bandwidth, right? So that's why we moved to switches. So all of the devices that you need to add on this network, you will have to click on the network devices, and then you'll see all of the devices. So wireless devices, you find them on this icon. I'm sure this one is a firewall. Security devices, you find them here. And then the cloud services for if you want to emulate a one, then you can click on this part, right? So this
Yeah.
is, so I'm just going through a tour of the packet tracer where we can find the devices that we need. But we said the first device that we're going to need when we're building our network, even if it's a smaller network, the one that we have at home, we're going to need a router, right?
Router.
The one that's going to take us out of our own network to the internet or to the outside world, right? So we have a router, and then on this, I usually prefer using the 1941 on this network, but you can pick any router here. So if you're interested, you can see the numbers, right? So the Cisco devices or the Cisco routers, they all have their numbers, right? Like they come with different ports with like different features and stuff like that. But the one that I prefer for this simple demonstration, I prefer the 1941. So this is the router there. And then at the top here, let's say you have added a wrong device and then you want to remove, want to delete that device, right? You can just click on that device and then you can come this side. You see this top part here, this icon, it says delete, right? So if let's say you've added the wrong device and now you want to remove it out of your own network, right? You can just click on that part and then say confirm delete. Do you want to delete the router 0? Then yes, and then delete, and then the device is gone. You know, and then if you want to remove these, right, and then continue with whatever you're doing, you can click escape, then escape goes back to the normal case, all right? So now, let's say we want a switch, the second device with a switch, right? So the role of a switch in a network, we're saying a switch is the one that interconnects the devices that we have. For example, let's say you have 24 computers in your network, and then you have one router. The router comes in with only maybe 4 ports. I'm sure you've seen that. Like if you look at the back of the router, it has 4 to 5 ports. As you can see, this one that I have here, how many ports does it have? It has 4, right? But now in your network, you might have like a network that is like 24 computers in the network, of which now the router can't support all of those devices that you have. So the router is just for the internet access only. So we need a cable called an Ethernet cable. I'm not sure if you've spoken about the different types of media that we can use to transfer data from one device to another, coax cables and those types of cables, right? So now we have the Ethernet cable, right? So we're going to connect one Ethernet cable. For example, we have this Ethernet cable down here. I'm not sure how Bongela is going to see that one. But Bongela, you know in Ethernet cable, right?
Let me see.
This one. I'm not sure.
Okay, yes, I do. That one is the
Yeah, the
internet. Yes.
RJ45, the one that is the back of your router there, then connects it to your laptop and stuff, right? So
Yes, we have that
we have
one.
that one at work, right? So usually that Ethernet cable, right, we plug it to a router, right? For example, you see this router we have here. Let me just do this, plug it to a router. And then you can see this one says LAN in one. You can see there. And then I have this one which says LAN 1. So I want to plug it to LAN 1. So this one is my local area network. Last time, did we speak about the difference between a LAN and the WAN? No, we didn't cover that part, right? So we have different types of net.
And that's the difficult part.
Yeah, like we said, we have different types of networks, right? We have the local area network, which it consists of like that. It's found in one geographical location. For example, here at Advanced Assessment, right? This one building, this is a LAN. And then we have another branch in Cape Town and Durban. So all these branches are connected together, which makes it what? A WAN, which is a wide area network, right? And then we said last time, I think if it's this group, we said now, in order for us to be able to share information with our other branch in Cape Town and then our other branch in Durban, we need what you call a WAN connection, whereby we can interconnect all of the networks together. And then what we do is we lease the line, we borrow the line from the internet service providers. For example, we go to any what you call them, the MTNs and all these guys, right, that run that. Especially what happens on the one, as a company like Advanced Assessment, we don't own that type of connection, right? We are full of control of what's happening in our LAN. So if our one is down, that internet, that line that connects us from Durban and Cape Town, if it's down, what we do is we just call our internet service provider. We tell them, okay, we have a network issue, right? So they fix it for us. So, but what happens in our LAN, we have full control of it, right? So, in terms of like creating users in our network and then assigning permissions, you know that in a network we have many resources that people can have access to. For example, we have softwares that only might be needed by one department, and then other departments they don't need that type of software. So we can create permissions in terms of like who has access to that specific what do you call specific software and stuff like that. So we can create things like that, right? So the LAN, we have full control of a local area network. Then the one connection part is says we lease a line, we borrow a line from any internet service provider. We say, okay, I want to connect my two branches, right? Because I want these people to be able to share information because they are working together. It's just like they are in different branches, but whatever they're working on, it's the same thing. The Durban branch need information that Cape Town is working on, and then Joburg branch also need information that Cape Town is working on. So we need to connect those three networks together. So once we connect those three, it becomes what? A wide area network, right? So a WAN, it covers a wide geographical location compared to a LAN, which is found only on what? On a LAN. And then the other thing about the LANs we said, I think, is it is easy to manage a LAN, right? Because it's not that big, right? But when it becomes a WAN now, there are so many resources that are in place, and then now to manage that, you need like the proper softwares to be in control of everything. We said again, the connections are controlled mainly by the internet service provider. If something goes wrong, then we call them, and then they come and fix for us, right? But inside our network, we need these guys. We said the first one is the big guy. We go for the okay, this one's a smaller one. We go for the router, and then down here we buy a switch. So this one is, we call it a switch. So what the role of a switch in this network, it would be to interconnect the devices that we have in our network. Let's say we said we have about 25 or 24 computers in our network, right? And then we said the router only has how many ports? Only maybe 4 ports or 6 ports. It can't connect all of these devices. So what we can do is we can plug in these devices directly to the switch. And then the internet is coming from the router. The router supplies the switch, and then the switch supplies what? All these devices. So once I click on this, right, once I hover on it, you can see how many ports it has there, right? It has port from port 01 up to port 24. So now we have different types of ports, right? Like we have the fast Ethernet. So if you see any port that is called the fast Ethernet, it just means that the speed of it is 100 MB per second, right? And then if it's a gigabit Ethernet, that means it's a 1 gig. So the 1 gig is faster than what? The fast Ethernet. So your first preference will be the gigabit Ethernet if you want the fast network or in your network, right? If you want the faster speed, then you can go for gigabit Ethernet options. And then the VLAN one, okay, we're going to talk about the VLANs where we logically separate our network and stuff like that, depending on the departments that we have. All right, so we said the fast Ethernet, it is just the speed, right? It's 100 MB per second. So also the second one, we have the gigabit Ethernet, which is in 100 gig per second. So every time when you're connecting these, your first preference will be what? The gigabit Ethernet, unless if you run out of the ports, right? Saying, okay, there are only 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, then that means I'm left with nothing now. I'm left with only with what? Fast Ethernet ports. Then you can now connect to those. But the gigabit Ethernet, they are the fastest ones, right? And then let me hover on the router. So you can see on the router it has gigabit Ethernet 0 and then 1, right? So it has 2 ports there. And then the other thing with the routers, right? This one, it looks like it has only 2 ports, but there is a card that we can use to add more ports on this router. For example, let's say a good example would be a PC, right? On a PC, let's say your PC is how many USB slots? Maybe 2 USB slots. And then now you want 5 USB slots. What do we do on the laptop? Let's say your laptop has only 2 USB slots, right? And then, but you want to connect more than 2. What's the other option we have?
Is
Right?
that
Yeah, that
extended?
extend. Yeah, so
I'm
you
not
get
sure what
that
it's
one.
called.
The limit for USB, it can take about up to one USB port can take about up to 27 devices, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the same with the router, right? You can see now on the router side, it has 2 ports. But now if we want more ports, right, we can do the same thing with what we do with the USB options, right? We can add more ports. So I want to show you how we can add more ports on the router. So you just click on the router. So let's go through the router. Let's click on it. Just add a router on your network, and then let's go through this. All right. So you can
Okay.
see under physical, we have how many tabs? Are you there? Yeah. So it is how many tabs? We have physical tab, we have config. The one that we're going to be working more on is the CLI, which is the command line interface, right? So Cisco devices is all about commands. So you're going to be typing in commands, making some changes, or configuring the router, configuring the switch. So it's only going to be the commands there. So on the physical, on the real world, this is how a router looks like, right? This is a router at the back of the router. So you can see it says here it is only gigabit Ethernet 1 and 2, right? So we have these slots, these 2 slots. Then we can use those slots to add more slots or more ports to this router. So first thing, the router, it is not hot swappable, meaning that we can't add a new feature or a new card there without switching it off. So we have to switch off the router and then add a new card. So you can see we have a button there, switching on and off button at the top. So just click on that button, switch it off. So zoom
Which
it, zoom it
button?
in, zoom it in, zoom in there. And then, okay, now it's on. You can see there's a switch, but now it's on, right? You can see green, and then now it's off. Bonga, did you find it?
Nope.
Under,
Nope.
so did you click on the router? Yeah,
When I click on the router, I get
yeah,
something that says router 1, physical
yeah, exactly.
config,
Yeah, you
CLI,
must be
and
on physical
attributes.
now. Physical part. Are you on physical tape? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me zoom.
I am on
You can see
part.
it now, right? All right.
Oh, okay.
So
I
to
see.
clearly see what's happening there, you can just zoom in and then you see the button there. Just switch it off. Mm. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's got 0, 1
Okay, switch it off.
green.
Like if there's green there, that means it's on. All right. And then the card that we want to I'm using it is on. Okay, so now we say the router, it is not word swappable, right? So we can't just add this card whilst the router is running. So we have to switch it off. That's why we're switching it off. And then now we can add any card that we want. So let's add HWIG 2T. You just click on it and then drag it to the slot there. So click on it, HWIG 2T, and then drag it there. Let me also maybe try to add this one, HWIG, and then add it there. 8, I don't want 8, remove 8. So if you want to add a cover, this is just a cover to cover this, right? So manually, like on a physical router, you can do the same thing, right? You switch off the router, you plug in a new card, right? Let's say this, because routers, what they do is you want, maybe let's say you want this router to supply internet to maybe 4 or 5 networks, but it only comes in with what? With the 2 standard ports. So we can add other ports on this router by using what? The HWIG2 and then add a card, and then now you have more ports. All right. So now, because we're done with this, let's switch it on and then close this.
Do you know everything you're doing after you click router? I can't see it.
Oh, yeah, it's called the dialog box. I remember last time I had the same problem. So what happens is once I click the router, right, there is a dialog box that comes in. Oh, it's gonna be a problem because all of the commands we have to do them on the CLI, and then okay, no, I can do this thing. Okay, let me see. Tell me if you can see if I do this. Okay, let me go back to Teams, but it will be like too much work. I remember I had a similar problem last time. Let me cancel sharing. So now that means I will have to share this new box with you now. The dialog box that just popped in. Let's see if it appears somewhere here. You can see it now, right? Must. Okay, so that means now I have to
Yes,
cancel
I can.
sharing the packet trace and then share this dialog box. Okay, so here we were here, right? So and then I zoomed in, we clicked, we have a card there already. All right, so now there is most important part in the router is the command line interface, right? So I was saying to you the different commands that you can use on a Cisco device, right? So let's go to command line interface, click on command line interface. So you can go back to that and click on,
You see, I do not have the cards online because I couldn't
oh,
see where you were dragging them to.
so now I have to switch back to the router. Okay, let me just do this. Where is the dialog box that I was working on? Oh, no. Come on, show me the box. Okay. Okay, let me do this. Let me go back to physical. All right. All right. Now you can see, right? Okay. So first we said we
Yes.
switch it off, right? And then you see there's HWIG2. Let me cancel this one. Let me remove this one. So let's say you have HWIG2 at the top there. You want to add this card to this slot there. So just click on it, drag it to that part. There it is. Yeah. And then
Okay.
don't forget to switch on the router once done with that. Okay, so now let me just switch back to Packet Tracer. Let me switch back to Packet Tracer and see. All right, so I'm back on this Packet Tracer now, not on the dialog box, right? So look, now we have the router one set already there at the top. And then now we need a medium to connect these devices together, right? So we want a cable that we can use. Which cable did we say? What are the other cables that we spoke about last time? We spoke about like different types of cables, right? Different
Yeah,
means
yeah,
the
the
coax
twisted,
cables, the
the
fiber cables, and
core
all those cables,
something.
right? All right. So now, okay, let me start with hovering on this route. Then we see like maybe we have more ports now. Come on. You see how many ports we have now? We at the beginning we only had gigabit Ethernet 0 and then gigabit Ethernet 1. But now we have added a card, right? So we have more ports now on this router. Similar to the example that I gave on a laptop, right? Let's say you have two slots for USB, and then but you want to connect or plug into like maybe 10 to 20 devices using a USB connection. So we said we can get an adapter, and then it will expand the USB connections there. So now, same with the routers. If your router comes in with two interfaces, which are gigabit Ethernet, you can add other types of interfaces, which is a serial 0, a 1 with different things. So now we have more ports on this device. Okay. Now I want to connect this router to the switch. So where do we find? So where do we find the cables here? So you see this icon here, one that looks like lightning there, right? So we have two options of connecting these devices. So if you're not sure which cable to use, what you can do is you can click on this and then it will automatically decide which port to connect to, right? So if you're clicking on this one, so first you click on this one and then it will give you the different types of cables that we have. And then if you choose this one, as you can see down here, it says automatically choose connection type for you. So if you're not sure which cable to use to connect a PC2 to a switch, you go for this one, and then the system on its own, it will decide for you which cable to use. But if you are sure which cable to use, we have the copper straight through cable, right? So the difference between we have this copper straight through cable and then the copper
Yes.
crossover. So the copper straight through cable, what it does, it connects two devices that are not the same, right? Two dissimilar devices. For example, you can see here, I'm using a copper straight through. So a switch to to a PC and then a switch to a router, we're using what? Copper straight through. But the crossover now, it connects two devices that are the same. So if I'm connecting a switch to a switch, then I have to use what? A crossover. If I'm connecting a router to a router, I need to use what? A crossover. So that's the difference between the two. So the straight through cable, it connects devices that are dissimilar, right? For example, the one that we used here, you can see we use this one here to connect from a switch to a router. And then yeah, and then you can see these devices are not the same, right? But now if I want to connect,
From the
let me do
router
this
to
and then the system has to decide for me. If I want to connect maybe this to that, you can see which type of cable is used there. It's a crossover cable, right? So when we are connecting devices that are the same, we use a crossover cable,
yes.
right? And then if we are connecting the devices that are not the same, then we go for copper straight through cable, right? And then we say it now, if you seem to have made a mistake and then you want to delete that, there's the button there, right? I want to remove this and then I want to delete that, click on it and then escape, then I push back my device there. So let's connect the devices. Let's add the computers there on our network. Add at least two laptops and then three desktop and one server. So where do we find these? You go down there, there's network devices, and then these are called end devices. So you click on end devices, you see all of the end devices there. So the first one is for network devices, second one is for end devices. Then you will see all of the devices there. Yeah, three PC and then
So we add
one server.
two PCs and two laptops. Okay. And two laptops.
Yeah,
Can I ask?
exactly.
Before you do this, right, you would
Yep.
have obviously decided on
Yep.
which
And then
topology
yeah, you remember
you're
that
gonna
part,
use,
yeah. Because
the
now,
star, the
because you
bar,
already
or the
know
ring.
the advantages of
Looking
a
at
bus and the
this,
disadvantages, so you know, okay, when I'm deciding on which topology to use, now you fully understand the advantages and disadvantages of that specific topology, right? So if you have like a bigger network, then there is no need for us to go for bus type of topology because it will slow down the entire thing, right? So now, yeah, so now if you fully understand the networks, that's why we say most people, when they fully
Okay.
understand how
Yeah, because it
networks work, they
moves.
move from being technicians or being engineers and then move to consulting, whereby you have fully understood how networks work. And then you know, okay, if I do one, two, three, this will happen, right? So you'll be just offering advice to different companies and saying, okay, if you mix this and that, or if you set up your network like this, it will slow down because you have worked on these networks and then you've worked on different environments. Now you fully understand the disadvantages and advantages of all these different types of devices or the setups. So okay, let's connect all the devices to the switch, right? Let's see which device to connect to the switch.
Okay.
Um, so we have that. We have first Ethernet 0, plug it in there. You can choose the port. You can see you can choose which port to use. But now, if you choose an automatic option, right, it will decide for you which port to connect to plug it to, right? But if you okay, let's if I use this one, right? If I click on that one, I don't have any option. I click, it decides for me. But I know now I'm connecting a switch to a laptop, so I'm using what? A copper straight through cable. Then I click there, click on this laptop, and then it's asking you to, okay, do you want to connect it to RS-232? You want to connect it to USB, or you want to connect to fast Ethernet? Yes, this is for internet, right? So I want to plug it in there. And then on the switch this side, which port do you want to plug it to? Because the switch has many ports. So you can see I go for 5. But now this side, it chose the wrong port because it's using fast Ethernet 01. I don't want that. I want the gigabit Ethernet. So let me just try to delete that. And then, because remember, I used automatic here and then it automatically decided for me. So I prefer to use gigabit Ethernet, the faster ones, and then the first one also decide there, right? So let's connect all the devices there. So what type of topology is this one? Yeah. So we have one central
That
device there.
one
It's a star
connected
topology,
to
right?
the thing in
And
the
then we know
middle.
the advantages of the star topology. You can see it's easy to add new devices to a star
It's the
topology, right?
star.
If I want to plug in a new device, let's say now this
Yeah.
switch, let me move on it. You can see it has how many ports? 24 plus those 2 gigabit Ethernet. If
Yeah.
I run out of the ports now, what I do is I just add another switch there. And then that switch comes in with more ports, and then that's how my network can grow. So it's easy to extend, or the star topology is scalable, right? It's easy for us to grow that network or add new devices anytime we want to. So have you managed to connect all the devices? Almost there.
Still trying, almost there.
So let's say you're practicing on your own, right? And then now you realize, okay, you don't know which cable to connect to. So you know, okay, we have an option whereby you can click on this one, and then the system will decide for you which correct cable to use, right? If you are stuck somewhere and then you're not sure which cable to use, then just click on that part. remind me at 10:30 we can take like 15 minutes tea break. Yeah.
When it's not drawing,
So
what's
you
the
know what you can do?
problem?
Just click on the cable,
I
right?
click on the
And then go to
cable,
the
but it
device.
doesn't
Okay, let
draw.
me cancel one and then show you. Let me cancel
Click on
one
the.
cable. Let's cancel this one.
Uh,
Okay. So let's say this cable, this is the cable that I want, right? Just click on the cable. And then once you move this caser to the Packet Tracer
okay.
platform, you can see the case has changed, right? It doesn't change.
Mine doesn't change. Okay.
All right.
I can still see
So
that
now
I've
click
chosen
on the
it
switch.
by that round with a cross over it, but it doesn't change.
Yeah.
Then I click on the
So you can see
switch.
many ports popping up, right? Which switch did you choose?
Or maybe I don't have enough ports.
That's
I
the
don't
one.
know
So
what's
if you hover on
happening.
it, like it is like 24 ports plus the 2 gigabit
I
ports.
chose 2960.
So must have 26 ports there. Yeah, okay. Can you switch screen to yours? Let's see what's happening there. I'm sure you can switch screen to
24.
yours, right? Yeah, let's see what's happening there.
Yes, I can. Because mine is just, it's not
Yeah, I
taking
can see.
anything. Since
Okay, let
I've
me.
connected one, it's just not taking.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you
You
see?
clicked
Can
where?
you see my screen? So I'm using this.
Yeah, click on that again.
See, nothing changes. Then I come here.
On the switch.
Here, you see it change,
Yeah,
means maybe I've
they
taken
are the
it.
ports there. Click
And
on the first
then
port, on
I
the
click
second port,
here.
the first Ethernet. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I think maybe since I downloaded yours now, it might be a different one.
So you see it
It
doesn't
might
do
be a
it
bit
like
different from
yours.
ours. Yeah, first Ethernet there, the last one.
And then
Yeah.
what do I do now? Then I need to select again here. Which
Yeah. It's easy, man. Yeah, repeat the same thing. Yeah, yours I think is different.
okay.
Okay, can you do me a favor? Can
Then
you
the
check
same
on
thing, the
the
same thing.
what do you call this part? There's
Yeah,
a
it's different.
at the no, not this one. The last tab. There is help somewhere, right? Can you click on the last? Yeah, is it help? Click on about.
Uh-huh.
It's 8 point.
Yes.
Which version is that? Oh, okay. No, it's the old one. I don't know why I downloaded the old one.
It's actually
Yeah, we downloaded the wrong
7.22.
one. That's why it's a bit different from ours. Okay, we will need to download the new one, the latest one, because this
Yeah,
old
it's
one it doesn't have the features
7.22.
that the 8.1 has. So, but for now we can do with 7 with this one. It's fine. Okay, let me switch screen to my side. Wait, what did I
Okay.
just do? Uh, okay, just there. Where's my main packet tracer? Okay. Okay, we're just waiting for you to complete the connections. Then once we're done with that, we can look at the physical part. All right. So now I want to check, want to look for how does this look like on a physical, right? Like, because
Okay, I'm
I'm sure you
done.
guys have gone to the server room, right, at work, right, and then see how the server room looks like, right? Usually there is a rack, and then in that rack you find there's a router at the top, there's a switch at the bottom, and stuff like that. Right. So now we want to see how is this gonna look like if it's physically installed, put in a server room on a rack, and then how is it going to look like. So you can click on physical option there at the top. You have physical. There is physical, right? You can see. So the server room looks exactly like this, right? At the top there we have our switch which interconnects all the devices. We have this which is our router, and then down here we have our server there, right? Are we all there? Do you see the?
Wow,
So, oh, brother, yeah, save the 7. I'm sure you're gonna click on.
wow, yeah, mine's different again.
Yeah, click on yeah, click on home.
But
Double click
yeah.
home, and then double click home again. Double click that one again. And then double click this one. So when you click on physical, what does appear there? Click again on that part.
Well, there was something,
Click on
there
it
was
again.
home office, then I clicked again. This is what
Uh-uh.
it appears now.
Click on what do you call, what is it? Yeah,
Where home
there we are.
physical.
Yeah, we
Here.
have to click 10 times until we get to the final destination. But I think there must be a
So
shortcut.
yeah, I have to
Okay.
click 10
All right,
times.
so at the
Okay.
top, okay, at the top here on your side, okay, I was presenting using your screen. So let me move to my screen. Let me switch to my screen. This one is more. So right at work, this is how it looks like. At the top here, this is the power station, right? You can see all of these devices are plugged in here, right? That's the one that supplies the power, the first one. And then here, the one that I have here is what we call the switch that we're working on the other side. You can see the switch comes in with so many ports, right, to connect all of these devices that we're going to have on our network. And then down here, this is the router. You can see the router, there it is, right? And then down here, we have the server. So on the physical, on the server room, this is how exactly this device is going to look like. They don't look like the way we're doing showing you on the logical side, right? You can see the logical, it looks a bit weird, right? But when you go to the server room, right, what you're going to do is you get in there. These devices, they don't have a screen on them, right? You can see there's no screen here. So you go in there with your laptop and
Yeah.
then plug in a cable called the console cable. So here's the cable that we have here. Did I switch off my camera? I think my camera is off. So here's the console cable. I'm sure, Bonga, you can see the console cable on my side, right? So I have the console cable here with me, right? So this other side is the USB slot, right? USB connection. So this USB connection, I plug it what either to a switch, and then the other side maybe to my laptop here, right? Or it can be the other way around, this other side or the other side. Then this is the console cable, and then after that, there's a software we can use to control a switch. So the switch, the router, these servers, the types I'm talking about, they don't come in with a screen. What we do is we go in there with our own laptops. Or some companies, what they do is they just leave one screen there and then one keyboard. Yeah, stays there on the server room, and then you use that always. But for me, my server room is that side. I always go there with my laptop, and then I connect my console cable to the switch, and then the other side to my computer. Then I manage or make changes to the cable to my piece. It's either my switch, it's either my router, either my server. So you need a console cable to control this device. So now what I want to do is I just want to try to show you how we can plug in a console cable to a router. Okay. So let's go back to logical. Click on logical, right? And then let's add a laptop, one laptop. We know where to find laptops now, right? Under end devices. So just drag in one laptop there, put it next to the router.
Yes.
I have one laptop there. And then you can see now, do you have a laptop next to the router? My network just went down. Like, trying to reconnect. Okay, okay, Bonga, I think there was a network breakdown, but now I think we're back. Okay, so here we have our laptop. So now you want, like, let's say now you're on a server room, right? You want to manage this router. We said the router doesn't come in with a screen. So if the company didn't put any screen there, so I come in with my laptop and then I want to console to this. Yeah, my network is bad. My network is
Yeah.
really bad. And then, so we have a laptop this side. So let's look for a console cable. Let's go for console. So you can see this, what color is this? Blue, right? Yeah, it says console cable, right? Click on the console cable.
Connection.
And then on the router, click on the router now. You can see the part that says console. Click on console, right? So now, what we do now physically, we are plugging in our console cable to the router and then to my laptop. So click on the laptop.
Yes.
On the laptop, you can see this part that says RS to
Then you connect it.
on the laptop. Yeah, yeah, click on it. All right. So now that's how you physically connect to a router. So you go in there with your console cable and your
Yes,
laptop,
232, yes.
you plug in your console cable to your laptop, and then the other side plug it into your to your router, right? And then now we want to manage this router, right? So click on the laptop. Again, on the laptop, you can see physical part, right? It shows you the headphone, the microphone, and other stuff there, right? So we are interested on where's the config? Is that the config?
Okay.
Okay, go to desktop, click on desktop, and then on desktop, you can see we have so many features there, right? There is a web browser, you can browse, there is command prompt. You know that our Windows laptops, they come in with command prompt, right? So this computer comes in command prompt, and then the other ones are the tools to manage like these devices, and then also you can VPN, right? We know like especially people who are working from home, to protect those lines, we VPN to the work environment, right? So now we want to use the terminal to manage the router. So click on terminal. And then by default, Those are the bits per second by default must be 9600, and then data bits must be 8 bits, and then parity non-stop. So by default must be like that. So now click OK.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you go to the blank screen now, right? So now we are inside the router now. Okay, let's do this. You can see at the top it says laptop 2, right? I'm not sure if, I don't think Bongega can see this one, right? Because I have now to switch.
Mm-hmm.
Bongega, can you see? Don't think she can. Yeah, you see at the top it says laptop 2, right? Bongega, can you see the, you, you can, you can't see? Okay, okay. So at least if you're there, okay, cool. Because I thought, okay, at the top there you can see it's written laptop 2 on the dialog box, right? On the dialog box that
I
was
can't
open, the
see,
box that
but
we are working on now,
no,
it's
I
written
can't see
laptop
your
2.
screen, but I understand what you
So
say.
what I want us to do is to just minimize this box, minimize it, and then go to the router, click on the router, and then on the router, go to CLI, the tab CLI, click on tab CLI. You can see the information. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, on router 1, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Say that. You are saying?
Says device powered on. So I need to first turn it on.
Oh, you forgot to switch on your device. Go back to physical.
Get an error.
Click on physical.
When I
Then
go to CLI, it
you
says
see
device must be
there's the
powered
button
on.
there. Click on physical. You must see a green light there on the switch. Yeah, but now if you go back to CLI, you'll see it's putting like a lot of hashtag, right? Meaning that the system is trying to boot up now. Go back to CLI, and then you'll see a lot of like pound
Yeah,
sign
no,
or
I see
hashtag
it now.
sign. It's changed to wait now. Okay, cool. So you see the information that you see now here is the same information that we saw on the laptop, right? So now we are directly on the router, right? But on the
They
real
have
world,
changed to
there's no
words
way you
now.
can directly click on the router like this because you need a screen or something, right, to be able to connect to that. So unless if you're using a screen, then you'll be directly on what? On the router. And then if we're using a laptop, then we are terminaling or we consoling to the router. So you can choose to manage the router directly using the screen that is next to the router, or you can use the laptop. So you have those two. And then, okay, not two options, we have three options because sometimes you will want to manage this router while you're at home, right? So we have something, a protocol called SSH, Secure Shell Protocol, right? Which will allow you to remotely connect to a router. Even when you're at home, you can connect to the router and then make some changes on the router, right? Remotely configure the router, right? So now we have looked at two options, but we have more than that. Okay, let's click on this laptop now. Go back to the laptop, yeah. You see now the last sentence it says, would you like to enter the initial configuration dialog, right? So a no. So the last sentence it says, would you like to enter the initial configuration dialog? Just click on no. Click on the laptop and then go to desktop tab. Go back to terminal. Okay, let me switch and then I'll show you this. Let me switch. Let me do this.
I don't have that.
Come on. All right, let me switch over. Where's my laptop? Where's my laptop? My laptop is somewhere. Okay, I think I'm on the laptop now. You can see where it says laptop 2 now. I'm sure you can see my dialog box now. You see where it says desktop, the desktop tab. and then click on terminal. Right, so
Okay, yes, I
it
can.
shows what? Okay, let's switch the screens to yours.
Mm-hmm.
Can you switch the screen to yours? Okay.
Terminal shows me a blank screen.
Good. I sent you the email a long time ago. Okay, check
Yeah, I'm
sent
switching.
items. Sent items. I sent the yeah, I got an issue with the network there. No, like I sent it long time ago, bro. Why you going like I said in the morning, bro? I promise you. So okay, what you looking for? Module one. So I'll give it to you, and then you guys just share. Where is it? Let's hope I'll be there tomorrow to see. So you're gonna be there tomorrow? Yeah. When? So now I'm not gonna do it. Huh? So I'm not gonna do it. Okay, you see this folder, right? TS print. There's module one, everything there. So the formative, the summative, and then the assignments are here.
Can you send the assignment also so that I can explain it to them?
The assignments are there, everything's there. All right.
He's going to print it out.
No, you can put it in a laptop actually. You can put it in your laptop, it's fine. Okay. Bongela, sorry. So you are on your, is that a terminal? Which tab is that? The first tab is what? Okay, I can't really see clearly what's written there. Okay, you're physical, all right. And then the second one, okay, we need the desktop or desktop. All right, close this. You're on desktop. Close this dialog box. Close this one, the small one, where there's an X there at the top.
First
Not the
tab
main
is
X. Yeah, there, that one.
physical. There's
Oh, and then okay, yeah,
configuration.
click for me on terminal there. Let's go back there.
Now
Okay. Yeah, okay. Click okay.
this one. Mm-hmm.
All right. So now you are using your laptop to manage or to configure a router. So you can see the last message there
Then I
saying
click
would you like
OK.
what. Say no. Type in no and then enter. All right. Then also switch. All right. So let me also go inside my terminal. Let me say okay, and then go inside the terminal, and then type in no, enter, and now you will see. Press enter until you see router and then a greater than sign. All right. Let me switch so that you can see the dialog box also. I know it's this part of switching many times. Let me say close that, and then open a new. There must be an easy way of switching to the new box. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Can I switch from this one to all right, so now you can see it's written router, right? And then what we want is we want to move from this part to a part whereby we can see the configurations that are running. As I said, right, Cisco is all about commands. So these devices, there are some commands that we have to type in. So the command to move from this platform is enable, E-N-A-B-L-E, and then enter. So you see now, you know what I did? Press enter, 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 enter. So it doesn't matter how many we have there. I just use this just for space, right? So you can see I have typed in that word there. So once you type in enable and then you just do enter, enter, and you press enter, enter, enter.
Why do
Or
you
you can
have
press
so many
enter once
routers?
if it works for you. It will work.
Why
if
do
you
you
press
have so
enter
many
once.
routers?
The reason I'm doing this is so that you can see that part, right? So now, if you are on this platform and you want to move to this platform, we use this command enable, right? To move, even if you're on the real router, right? Like working on the real router, you need to type in these commands and then it takes you, we call the platform a user view mode, right? So on this platform, you can view the running configurations on this router. What IP address has been configured on this router, what other protocols have been configured on this router. So all that information, you can see it. Oh, okay, it's 10:35. All right, so we'll come back after 15 minutes, right? So, but this part is a user view mode. And then on the group, I will send the other commands that we can use for this because it will be easy for you to remember the commands if you have them like on the book and then practice and stuff like that. So after tea break, after 15 minutes, so what time are we coming back? Okay, after 15 minutes, and then we carry on from where we left off. Is that okay? Okay. Let me pause. Resume. Okay, listen now. You bought your router, or the router is coming from another department, and then you want to see which configurations that are running on this device. Is it configured already, or it's just like a new router with no configurations? So the first point to start with on it will be show running config, just to see what are the configurations that have been applied to this router. Is there anything that has been configured? So you can see it says building configuration, current configuration, nothing much there. And then if there's more there, and then if you press enter, it will take you down. And the license, you can see the license for that software. And then spanning tree. Okay, on this part now, you can see it says interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0. Which interface is it? The ones that we saw on the router. And then it says IP address, no IP address, meaning there is no IP address that has been signed to this interface. So for the router, all of those interfaces, they need their own IP addresses because they will be representing what? Different networks. Right? And then you can see interface gigabit Ethernet 0/1. It says no IP address, duplex. I think last time we spoke about the duplex and then the half duplex, right? So the full duplex is whereby a device can send and receive information at the same time. So it can do both simultaneously. And then half duplex is when the device can only do one at a time. It can't do both. So back in the day, we used to configure this and say duplex auto so that it can decide. Because sometimes you might find that we have one device that is a full duplex and then the other one is a half duplex. So if your duplex is configured to auto, that means the other one will adapt. The one that is full duplex will adapt or drop to the one that is half duplex. But now most of the devices are full duplex. The new ones are full duplex. They can do both at the same time, send and receive. So this one is the clock rate for the serial interface cable. So, but the most important thing, okay, the other one is shutdown. So if you see this shutdown, that means the cable or the interface is down. There's a command that we can use to switch on the interface. I'm sure you saw on the router side where the interface is red. And then on the PC, the interface is like green, right? So if the interface is red, that means the interface is down. So there is no packet, there is no information that can travel on that interface because it is down, right? So once you switch it on, this shutdown will disappear, and then no IP address. Here there will be an IP address here on that part, and then the rest we're going to leave it as it is, right? So to go down, keep pressing enter until we are back to user view mode. Okay, wait, there's important part. Interface VLAN. So VLAN can I break it down now? Okay, no, the VLAN, let's leave it for other sections, right? But in short, VLANs are designed or are used to logically separate your network. So let's say now your network has grown up to maybe, because some companies are big, right? You find that you have like maybe 800, 900 users in one building, right? So now, if all of those devices are on the same segment, meaning that on the same VLAN, now the broadcast messages, now they can slow down, they can take your bandwidth, right? So in order for us to limit the techniques that we can use to limit the noise in our network, we can logically separate the networks, meaning that we can have what we call a virtual local area network inside a local area network. So per department, you might create what? A VLAN for one department, another VLAN for another department, so that when the devices start to broadcast, the broadcast message is the message whereby it goes to each and every device that's on the network. So that broadcast message now, it can take much of the bandwidth if like we have maybe 800 devices, right? It can slow down our network. But if we logically separate that broadcast, the broadcast will be contained in one department. So it doesn't slow us down, right? So the way we design our network, if you design it wrong, it might affect the entire network, right? So now we have to make sure that when we're designing a network, we logically separate. So we're going to get to a part whereby we have one LAN, one big LAN, right? And then we virtually separate it using the VLAN, like using like maybe let's say IT department, maybe HR department, finance department, all of those departments will be on what? On their own VLAN. The VLAN, what it does is devices might be connected to one switch, but to find out in order for them to be able to communicate, they need a router. So what you do is they're all connected to one switch by default. If devices are connected to one switch, they all must be able to communicate because by default they're on VLAN 1. But once we logically separate them, and then they're all maybe 24 connected to one switch, and then we logically separate them using the VLANs, now they will need a router in order for them to skip or to jump from one VLAN to another VLAN. Makes sense? So now the broadcast can be limited in one area. So if we logically separate, let's say our IT department is 15 or 20 people, the broadcast only happens on what? On that department. So it doesn't necessarily slow down what? The entire network. It's on that one specific network. And then also the VLANs, the other advantage of VLANs, it makes it easy for us to manage our network. If the network has become big and then you didn't separate it, then it becomes difficult for you to do troubleshooting, to find a fault in that big network. But if you have separated it into smaller segments, then you can kind of like pinpoint and say, okay, maybe the problem is affecting what? Only the IT department. So you focus on the IT department, right? Rather than focusing on the entire PPSA, like going from one department to the entire. So kind of like tedious work, right? So if we logically separate our networks, then it becomes easy for us to say, okay, only the IT department, the IT department is always, the network is always probe on our side, right? Let's say maybe only the admin department is the one that is experiencing some problems. Then I know, okay, finance department, they're not complaining. That means now I can only focus on what? On that specific network, that specific department. Yeah. So that's the other use of the VLANs, kind of make things easy for us. Like, so there's so many advantages of the VLAN. We're going to get to that part, but now we want to work around or work with this router. Okay, so now we have seen that the interfaces, they don't have IP addresses, right? So we say it on this platform, this is the user view mode, right? We can't run any configurations on this platform. So we need to move to a platform called the global mode, where we can configure. Sorry, caught me. I forgot to sign. All right, so on this router, right, on this platform, we're saying this one is the user view mode, right? And then now, in order for us to move to a different mode, we need a different command, which is terminal. Oh no, config. I forgot the command, man. Configure terminal. All right. So you can see now, okay, so in order for us to move from the user view mode, we said, okay, let me go back to user view mode and then run some of the commands there. Show running config, okay, we show IP Let me say show IP interface brief. So you can see now this platform is only to show what is currently running on the on this router, and then the other command will be show VTP not complete VTP status. See. So on this platform, I can't configure anything. I can't make changes to the router. What I can do is I can run commands that will show me what's happening with that specific protocol or that specific interface, right? So if I want to narrow it down and then say show IP interface brief. So here I'm looking at all the interfaces, right? And see, is there an IP address? It says unassigned, unassigned, unassigned. You see, all of these interfaces, they don't have IP address, right? And then you can see it says protocol administratively down, meaning that that shutdown still on, right? Like we have to switch on the device. That means the interface is still ready. So on this platform, as I said, we can't do much. Okay, we can do a lot of things, nice things on this platform, but it only allows you to see the running configurations, what changes have been made to this device, right? So let's move to a platform called the global mode so that we can be able to make changes on this router. When I customize this router, right? So the command is configure terminal. So there is an international exam that you can take for this to prove your skills in the Cisco industry, which is called the CCNA. So you know that even in finance, right, like they have their own, they call maybe the license or the industry certificate. So if you have studied finance, right, you have a degree or diploma, whatever it is in finance, then if you want maybe to have an industry certificate, then they can go ahead and do things like that, right? What's the term? What's the term they use for that? On our side, we call it industry certificates. In finance, what are those? Is it a license or what? Yeah, but some yeah. So we also have the same thing on the IT, right? Whereby we have to be part of a certain body, right? So if you have a certificate under Cisco, you are proving to the employers that okay, you fully understand how to configure Cisco devices. If you have a because people coming with degrees at high school, in
It's
university,
like
they don't teach us
body
how to use a
question,
Cisco
body
device. They'll
something.
be generic, like they're talking about the networks, how a network works and stuff like that, but they don't dive deep into the Cisco devices. They don't dive deep into the Huawei devices. So now, once you have like your degree or your master's in maybe computer science or networking, then you have to prove to companies that okay, Cisco devices, I know Cisco devices in and out, so you have to be part of, you do like a certificate in the under the Cisco, then that proves okay, this person fully understand the Cisco devices. So the same with I think she said it's a board was whatever certificate. Same with us on the IT side, we need that. Even though you have your masters on the side, but we need these certificates on the side to prove that I fully understand everything that has to do with Cisco, with Huawei, with Juniper, and all those other. So most companies now, if maybe look at your network, you find that the devices that you're using is Cisco or Huawei. Last time I was in Pretoria configuring the Huawei devices for the government. So they were switching from Cisco to Huawei because Huawei is kind of like cheaper now. It's cheaper in terms of licensing and then the support and stuff like that. It's cheaper than Cisco. So most companies are kind of moving from Cisco to Huawei. But those are the two big competing companies when it comes to network devices. Okay. So now we are on this platform. If you check now on this platform, it says router, config, and then the pound sign, right? It means that we are inside what do you call the root the global mode where we can configure the router now. Okay, then I want to try something else. Name. Let's change the name of the router. So you see now this router, it just says router, right? So when you're a network engineer, most of the times you're
Yes.
going to be working on more than one router. Like let's say maybe you have opened 10 routers at the same time, right? So there's a router in Cape Town, there's a router in Durban, there's a router in Joburg, right? So all of the name this side, most of the times on my network, what I do is I give the name of to the router based on the location that the router is in, so that when I'm configuring, I know, okay, I can't make mistakes, right? And configure a Joburg router and then assign the configurations for the Debian, right? So I give it a name that will say, okay, show me, okay, this router that I'm configuring now is the one in Cape Town, is the one in Durban, and stuff like that, right? So name, I'm not sure if that's how you do it. Okay, it's been a minute, man. Let's say, let me say Durban once. Start with my Durban branch. Uh, there's something missing there. Okay, if so in Cisco, right? If you forgot a command, what you can do is you use a question mark. Just type in a question mark. So now it's a good thing because it happened now, right? So you see, I know that I want to assign a name to this router, to this device, right? So I want it to change from router to be specific and say Debian, right? So now I forgot that part, how to do it. So if you forgot the command, you know that, okay, there's a command that has to do 1, 2, 3, but you forgot that specific command. You can type in a question mark. So a question mark is like you asking the router or the operating system to say, okay, what are the commands that I can use? So if you check down here, there is host name. Is set the system network name, right? So the command that I'm looking for is what? Host name instead of name, right? So you know, okay, there is a command that has to do 1, 2, 3, but you forgot that command. So what you do is just type in a question mark and press enter. You will see all of the commands that you can use. And then I want to go back and then let me try that now. Let's say host name and then Debian, right? Which means I spelled it wrong. I don't like it. Let me change. Okay, they changed it, right? So instead of saying router now, I'm being specific. Say, okay, this is Debian router. So when I'm configuring this, I know that I'm working on the Debian router. Yeah. So when you go to your server room, right, the server room might have like maybe 4 or 5 routers in there, right? So now, once you have given them names like this, when you're switching on to a next router, from one router to another router, once you see this part, you know, okay, oh, now I'm working on the Debian router, right? Now I'm working on this router. Okay, so you give them names, right? So that you know, okay, which router am I working on? So did we change the router name? Let's change the name of our router. So the command is host name and then give it any name. So all this, it takes practice, right? There's no way you can remember the entire thing at once. Like you need to practice this. Because remember, like now when you, let's say the network is down, and then you can't be typing in a question mark to try to remember the next command. You must know these commands by heart. Okay. So now, you remember the interface that's on the router. Which interface do you choose on the router? To plug the interface that we plug, the port that we plugged in on the router. What is it? On my side is gig 0/0. Oh, let me check if yours, does it show you the interfaces? Okay, let me switch back to, okay, let me switch back and then show you. Let me do this. It must show you somewhere there. I have to go back to the main topology. All right, so you can see on my side, Bongega, can you see my, I think I've switched now. Okay, you see where it says gig 0/0? Does it show that side? Bongega, does it show only? And then you see, okay, on the laptops, does it show this information? Okay.
Yes, I can.
No, no, I know what to do. Let's do this. Or explain.
Well, on the
Yeah.
old one, it doesn't
We need to
show.
activate
It doesn't
this.
show on
So
my
you click
version.
on,
It doesn't show.
what's the platform, by the way?
It only
Options,
has router one.
right? Click on options.
Nope, it doesn't show that information. It's just plain.
And
Let
then
me check.
preferences. The options for the for the main packet trace. And then where is the other? There must be interface tab. You can see interface tab. And then there is a part that says always show port labels in the logical workspace. Check that part. Always show port labels.
Which option?
Yeah.
Okay,
So check that
okay.
part
Let
and
me
then
try.
just close it.
Options,
Okay,
preferences.
click on it there. All right. So now you can see, check this part, what's the interface on the next to the router. On my side, it's a gig 0/0. All right. So now on the router, right,
Yeah,
we're
it
saying
shows now.
each interface on the router, it might be representing different networks, right? So we want to assign an IP address to this interface, which is gig 0/0 on the router, right? So we know what what an IP address is, right?
Yeah,
All
same
right.
here. Gig 0/0.
So now each and every device on our network, it needs a unique IP address. So the first thing that the router does or the device does when it connects to a network, it sends out a broadcast message looking for an IP address, right? So because it knows in order for it to be able to communicate with other networks, it needs to be
Yes. Identity
assigned an IP address.
device.
So we have so many ways of assigning IP addresses. We can use manual. Manual is whereby you, as an administrator, you manually go to each and every device and then assign IP address to that device. And then we have a DHCP server where you can just give a pool, create a pool on the server, and then the devices on your network will be taking IP addresses from or be requesting IP addresses from the DHCP server. So the DHCP server now will be the one responsible for what? Issuing out IP addresses. For example, if your network consists of like 50 devices, it will be tedious work for me to go to each and every device and then assign it an IP address. So I need to automate this task, right? So there is a DHCP. So a DHCP server is the one responsible for assigning IP addresses to each and every device that we have in our network. So what I do is I can just create a pool. A pool is whereby we say, okay, my IP address start from maybe 1 up to 254. So if I have maybe 254 computers in my network, they will all be requesting for IP addresses from the DHCP server. So you tell this server what's the pool name, what's the pool size, and then these guys, when they are connecting, they request, and then the DHCP server issues out. Okay, so there is a trade to that one. So when we let's say you have a printer and then a server on a network. So a printer, we have to manually assign it an IP address. Why? Because let's say if you don't manually assign a IP address to a printer, what happens is these IP addresses that devices are getting from the DHCP server, they usually change. Let's say, for an example, today, so what happens? This DHCP server, it lists its IP addresses, it borrows them. So it can specify a time and then or days, and then it borrows the IP address to what? To these devices. Let's say now this PC receives 192.168.1 today, and then the following day, someone else, the first one to come into your network, right? And then that dot one might be given to what? To a different one. But we don't want things like that on a printer, because on a printer, we give these computers the printer IP address, or on a server say, okay, when you want to print out, this is the IP address. So if the IP address of the printer keeps on changing, that means now every day the administrator has to go back to the printer and then give it a new IP address. So what we do is we assign printers and servers. Okay, for any device that you don't want the IP address to change, you manually assign it. We call it static assigning. So if I don't want the IP address of a server to change, I manually assign this server. Or if I want this IP address of this server or this computer to change, I manually assign it, right? So it will always be using what? That same IP address. And then if I use DHCP, it's called dynamic host. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, of which is dynamic assigning of IP addresses. We said it lists IP addresses. So it will use the IP address today one. So this serves up on IP addresses. Let's say, for example, you have 254 computers in your network, right? And then
Please.
now this person doesn't come into work today, but that IP address is assigned to them. Now the new people can't have IP addresses. So if we're using a DHCP, we're saying that if this computer is not at work, like this guy is not at work today, then the IP address he was using yesterday can be assigned to a different computer. right? So I don't have to be running around looking for IP addresses or changing IP addresses on devices. So I leave that to the server to manage the IP addressing, right? So we have those two options whereby we can manually assign IP addresses or dynamic assigning of IP addresses, right? So I will show you how to do that on the server, right? Okay, so on this router, I don't want the server or I don't want the DHCP. Huh? Oh, I didn't share. Oh, snap. Okay, let me. Sorry. So I've been pointing out on these devices, and then on your side, I'll go. Okay, so now you can see, right? I thought I was sharing. Okay, there is a DHCP server, right? So we're saying
Please
this
share your
DHCP
screen.
server is
Sorry,
the one
sir.
that will be responsible for
Please share
assigning
your
IP
screen.
addresses, dynamically assigning IP addresses to all of these devices in our network, right? And then on this part now, we have, if this is a printer, right? We say, okay, we do have a printer somewhere. Let me just add a printer. So this is a printer on our network, right? And
Yeah,
then
I
this
can.
printer, everyone is using this printer. And then most of the times when people are printing out something, these computers need to know the IP address of what? Of the printer, right? So if we say now, if the IP address of the printer keeps on changing every day, that means it will affect these devices. That means now we have to go to these devices and then redirect them and say, okay, today the printer is 192.168.10. Today is what 11. So you can't do that. So we can manually assign IP address. But on a bigger network now it's cooler because we can direct these devices straight to the server. We create this as a print server. So when they want to print out something, they speak to the server. First to the server. The server will check the permissions and say, okay, this one is an intern. Intern is not allowed to print, and then blocks them. Says, okay, sorry, you can't print. And then maybe this one is a manager. So we can create things like priority. You can prioritize when it comes to printing. If there's a manager and then this one is just a general employee, and then all of them they print at the same time, we can prioritize who gets the printing job first using the print server, right? All of those things can be controlled under here. So instead of like giving these computers the IP address of the printer, we just say, okay, communicate with the server. The server will direct you to the printer. And then the server will just check on our, what do you call, on the permissions board and say, okay, do you have permissions to print? Yes or no? Yes, then you print. If no, then you don't. Because on the printer here, some of the printers, they don't have much memory in order for us to be able to control everything there, right? So we usually prefer to control it using the print server. So all the permissions, we create them here. And then if anyone wants to print out anything, they communicate directly with the server. The server takes the print job, takes it to the printer. That's if you are allowed to print. Okay. So that's how a network works, right? There's so many approaches that you can take in terms of doing this. Okay, so here at the top here we have the router. This is our router. So now we want to go back to the router and then assign it an IP address. But first we need to know what's the network of this local area network, right? What's the IP address? So we need to write it down. So you see this icon there, it's a notepad. Okay, if you want to place a note, you click on it, and then let's say my entire network is 192.168.10.0/24. So if you want to write anything, there it is. So you can see 192.168.10.0/24. So that means this is our network, but at .0 we can't assign it to any device. Then let me write there the router IP address 192.168.10. Maybe 254/24. Okay, there's another important part now I need to show you. And then let's say 192.168.10.1/24. So, all right. So you see the devices that I don't want the IP addresses to change, I can write down the IP addresses there. But on these ones, since they are going to receive the IP addresses from the DHCP server, I can't write the IP addresses there because I can write 192.110.1, right? And then the server gives it a different IP address. So this one, I will manually assign an IP address, and then that one, I'll manually assign it what? An IP address, right? So, okay, I want to break down something before we start with the IP addressing. for this part. There's a tool I need to use now. It's been a minute without using that tool. Let me see if I'll be able to control it. Switch. All right, so let me get a pencil there. Pencil. How does this thing work now? Okay, I forgot how it works. Okay, but let's say now this is 192.10. Let's say 168.0. Okay, let me make it simple. Let me make it a 168 here, and then a dot 68 here, and slash 24. All right, so this is when we say this is the network. You see, this slash 24 now it represent this slash 24. It represent the network now. So when we say your network is a slash, so let's say my network is a slash 24. Slash 24, it says that this 8, but we spoke about IP addresses last time, right? We said an IP address consists of how many bits? 32 bits. Yeah. 32 bits there, right? So an IP address is a 32 bits. So now, let's say they give you a network and then they say it's a slash 24. You see, this part, the first octet is what? Is 8 bits. The second octet is what? Is another 8 bits. The third one is 8 bits. And then the last one is what? 8 bits. So when you put together that, it makes what? 32 bits. So now, let me start again and then say 192. My handwriting there, I'm using a mouse. Right, 168. Dot, let's say 78.0/24. So you can see this dot represent that this is 8, 16, 24, and then 32. So if they say your network is a slash 24, it means that 8, 16, 24 is reserved for what? For network. So in all of the devices that we have in your network, they must be using what? The same IP address. The first 3 octets must be the same. And then the last part, we call it what? The host addressing. So we can use the last 8 bits for addressing the IP computer, the computers, assigning IP addresses to computers. So 3 there, 4, 5 up to 254. So now if they change, they say, okay, now it's no longer a slash 24, it's a slash 8. It means what? The first 8 bits is reserved for network. And then 1, 2, 3, we can play around it. We can make some changes. So if your network is big, then you need what? A slash 8. For smaller networks, we can use a slash 24. If you're using like, let's say, a medium organization, then you need a slash 16. So that means 8, okay, let me change the color. Come on. So that means 8, 16. So these first 16 bits is reserved what? For network. The last 2 part is reserved for the host assignment. So if your company, if you know, okay, you're working for a big organization, usually we go for what? For a slash 8, so that we can have more IP addresses that we can assign to devices. If it's a slash 16, usually it's for a medium organization, right? And then smaller organization whereby they have like less than 254 devices, then we can use a slash 24, right? And then now, this part again, when we are writing it on the network, right, on the router devices or on the switches, let's say it's a 192.168.10.0. So, and then they say it's a slash 24. On the computers, we can't write, on the routers, we can't write slash 24, but we have to represent this 24 differently. So we're saying this slash 24, it represents the network part, right? So if we say 8, 16, and then 24, this is for what? For network. The last part is for host assigning, right? So the last 8 bits are for host assigning. So now we can't write /24, but we can represent it differently. So wherever is the network part, you write what? Let's do this. 255. Wherever is the network part, 255.255 dot what? 0. The last part will be 0. So you can see, Lana, we said this is the network part. So I put what? 255. And then this one is the network part. I put 255. Then that one is the network part. I put what? A 255. Right. And then the last part we said is for host assigning. So we leave it like that. So now my question is, if now, let's say they give you a /16, how are you going to represent it using the 255s? I forgot how to delete this thing. Now I need a new page. How do I even delete this thing? Select. Okay, so now we're saying it's a /16. Same IP address, 192.168.1.10.0. And then they say /16. We know that if it says /24, we said 8.16.24 is the network part, right? And then we said we can't write /24 on the router. So we need to convert that into 255s. So wherever is the network, we put what? 255. That's 8, 16, 24. So that means all these 3 octets would be what? 255, 255, 255, and then .0, the last part. Right? So now we're saying you are given a /16. How are you going to represent that? So we said, which one would be the network part here on the /16? So 8, 60, right? So these 2 would be the network part. So these 2 will have what? It would be 255, 255 again, .0.0, right? So everywhere is where's the network part, you put what? A 255. So now let me change that. Let me make it a /8. Which one? How are you going to represent that? Exactly. At least you got that one, right? So yeah. So that's the simpler what you call concept, right? So on the router, the thing is, on the router, I can't type in /24, right? So I have to convert that /24 in a
It's gonna
format
be
that the router will understand.
255.0.0.
Understand this format, right? So I have to convert that. Every time they give me a /8, then I have to convert that when I'm assigning it on the router, right? To a 255.0.0.0, right? If it's a /16, 255.255. Stuff like that, right? So now let's go back to that one, right? And then to the router straight. Let me switch to my router so that you can see what I mean by that. Let me switch. So now we have to go to the router and then go to the router, but go to the router using the console. So you're going to use the laptop, right? Don't go directly to the router. So I'm going to click on the laptop, and then under laptop, I go to terminal, and then, okay. So I want to control the router using the terminal, not directly via the router. So let me switch this so that I can see my screen. Let me see if I can switch to the new one. So now we know how to connect to the router via the console cable, right? You see where I'm at now? All right. Bongeka, are you inside the laptop terminal? All right, let's do this. So we have to go to user view mode, right? And then from user view mode, we go to yeah. So type in enable, enter. You see it changes now to the £sign.
Yes.
And then we need to go to global mode, because on global mode, that's the only platform we can make changes. On this platform, we can only view what is running in our computer, right? So,
Enable.
configure terminal, and then you see we are on global mode, which changes now to Debian, config or router name, config, and then the pound sign. Right? So now I don't want that.
Okay, so
Now
configure
we
terminal.
gotta go to the inside the interface, that interface of the router or the port of the router. You still remember the port, the interface port? So the interface of that router, it was interface, on my side is interface gig 0/0, the one that's in the router. Yeah, on your side, I don't know which one is it, but check there. But I think we checked together, we said we agreed that it's all using the same port, right? So type in interface space gig 0/0. So the reason why we're typing gig 0/0, we want to go inside that interface and then assign it an IP address. Because remember, the router comes in with how many interfaces. You can see how many interfaces we have there, right? 4 of them.
Plus
So you need to be
gig.
specific. Okay, the IP address that you're assigning now, you want to assign to which interface or to which port, right? So that's why now, because when we hovered on the router, it had like how many at the beginning? It had like only 2 ports, right? Which was gigabit Ethernet 0, and then the other one was 1. And then we added a card. It ended up having like maybe 4 or 5. So now what we want is, when I go to a specific interface and then assign an IP address to that interface, right? So enter. So now you'll see a change, right? It says Debian config space if for interface. So that means now we are inside an interface. So I wrote down the IP address of the router on my interface, on my Packet Tracer platform. So now the command for assigning an IP address, okay, let's say we don't know the command. Let's try to use the question mark and see if it can give us some commands. Oh, you see, there are so many commands in here.
Okay.
Yeah, there is, but the one that we're looking for is IP, right? It says interface internet protocol config. So that's interface. No, man, we are already inside the interface, so we're not looking for that. IP address.
So it's interface.
So sorry,
it's
don't type in that
IP.
top part. Just type in IP space address. So this IP address that you are applying now, that we are configuring, is going to that gig 0/0 interface. So IP address 192.168.10.254, and then space, it's a /24. How are we going to present a /24? We said the routers, yeah, 25.0, right? They enter, they see the IP address is applied. So let's enter the IP address 192.168.10. So this is the IP address of what? Of the router. But the router, we said it has so many interfaces, right?
255.
Maybe 4 or 5 of them.
255.
So first we specified which interface do you want to apply this IP address to, which is interface gig 0/0, right? And then once we were inside the interface, we type in this command, right? And then now the problem is the interface is still down, still red. So we need a command that will switch on that interface. So the command for Cisco for switching on the Cisco interface is no shutdown. Shutdown. It's complaining on my spelling. So you will see a message saying link state change interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0 change stage to up now. And then if you check again on the interface, you see the color of the router is changing now. It's going to green. So on the real world interface, there is no no shutdown interface. I don't think you won't have that, right? So you only apply the interface, you only apply the IP address, and then the IP address will be there. Okay, so since this interface is an IP address, we want to check the running configuration, or want to verify that this IP address that we assigned, it is applied on the correct interface. So now we need to go back to the mode that will allow us to view the running configurations, right? What's that mode that allows us to view? The global mode, remember I said this is where we make changes on. Yeah, user view mode, right? So in order for you to go back to go back one step backwards, you can use exit. Let me see, exit, type in exit. You see, it takes you one step back. Now I am on global mode. How do I know that
It's
I'm
the
on global
global
mode?
mode.
You can see this is deb and config. Once you see only config, then you are on what?
Oh, so it's user mode.
So when I was on the interface, it said config -if, right? So now I'm on global mode, and then I don't want to be on global mode because I want to view the running configuration. So what command can I use to go back one step? I can use exit again, so it will take me back one step. So you can see now we are back on what? On user view mode, right? So it took me one step backwards. So let me see if I can maximize this. Can I?
What
All right.
exit again?
So now, what's the command that we can use to show running configurations? That's the first command that we ran. I think the second command that we ran. So type in show running config. No, show running config. So type in show running config and then type in enter. You'll see. And then
Show
show running config.
IP status. Oh, what? Show something running command. Oh, okay. I remember that tab.
All right. So let's show running. Okay, show running status. Because now we're inside the interface. IP space packet space subscribers. Even if you just go to the complete so just remove space minus 192 192 dot chair 255 and then space 1255 255 yeah, but the interface is still red, so we need to switch it on, and off. From now, space shutdown. Space. Yeah. So now we're gonna go to the typing message. So we're gonna exit the screen, enter. So now change instead of if say exit again, enter again, show typing SHO show. Yeah, sure. Yeah, H space space space. Commands are running on this Cisco here. Can you imagine just running with so many code lines that you have to type in there? You have to remember everything. Okay, like now. So we are on show running config. Let me press enter. So once you press enter, we're looking for interfaces now. All right. So the interface that we've assigned in IP address to is gigabit Ethernet 0. Before it said no IP address, but look now, it says IP address, and then it is an IP address now, that interface, right? And then down here, it is shut down, but there is no shutdown anymore, right? Because you have switched on the interface. Then these, we're going to leave it as default. So now we have assigned an IP address to that interface. Makes sense? All right. So now let's say press enter, enter, enter until, let's say now you want to check only interfaces. You don't want to check all that information. You want to be specific in your search, right? So type in SHO for sure, IP interface brief. So you are now specifically looking for interfaces only. You want to show information about interfaces. So you type in show IP interface brief. And then let's see, enter. So you can see the gigabit Ethernet IP address has been assigned. Okay, yes. Method status, manual app. and then protocol is up. So when you're troubleshooting, right, these are the commands that you're going to use. Especially that the show running commands, the user view mode is mostly used when we're trying to troubleshoot. We're looking for a fault. We do not know. We're trying to find a problem. What's the cause that causes the system not to be able to communicate with each other, right? So you come back here and try to check if the interface is an IP address or is it protocol. The protocol is up and stuff like that. So you gonna use this platform to troubleshoot a lot or to just check what's happening with your device. Okay, now we can also break it down or narrow it down. So IP interface, and then be specific. Which interface are you looking for? Come on, interface gig 0/0. I think so. So now the interface brief, it pulls up information about all the interfaces that I have, right? And then it gives me a tab for IP addresses. If these guys are assigned IP addresses, it says there's an IP address, but the rest unassigned, right? And then now I want to be specific. I want to narrow it down. Instead of like showing all of these interfaces, I want to look at only one interface. So you just say show IP interface gig 0/0. I think that's it. Okay, there it is. So it shows me information about one specific interface. It says gigabit Ethernet 0 is up, line protocol is up, that means it's connected. Interface IP address is, it shows you, and then now it writes a /24. And then broadcast address is 255.255.255, blah, blah, blah. All right. So that's why on a small network like this, that we can't assign 255 to a device. So the last available IP address on this /24 is a 254. That's the last available because the 255 will be reserved for the broadcast. The broadcast is whereby the devices are looking for each other or they want to send something to every device, right? So they use a broadcast IP address, so which is 255. MTU maximum transmission unit is 1500 bytes. Okay, for now, you don't need to know about that. All right. So you now this okay, we're closing at 1, right? So we want to take our lunch break at 1. Is that okay? Okay. So let's do this. The router now, it is an IP address, right? It is sorted. So the router, since it is an IP address, it makes it easy for these other devices to be able to access the internet, right? But we said the devices that we have on our network, there are so many, right? They're
Yes.
too much. So what we can do is instead of us manually assigning IP addresses to all of the devices, let's assign IP address or create a pool on a server. So now I want to go back, switch back to the server. Okay, now I'm back. Let's leave the laptop now. We can minimize that, the box, or close it. Now I want to focus on the server. So I want to create a pool of IP addresses,
Hello.
right? So click on the server. So the server, we want to use that server as our DHCP server. We want to use it as our DHCP server. All right. So now you can see it says, Bongega, can you see on your side like the dialog box that I've switched to? I don't know. It looks like. All right. So there is a part that says, so this server also, it needs an IP address first, right? So we need to assign it an IP address. So we're going to manually assign an IP address because we said if we manually assign an IP address to any device, then that means that device, that IP address won't change, right? So click on desktop. There is a tab called desktop. There's
Yes, I can.
physical, config, services, and then desktop. I am on server 0 now. You are not on, you don't have a server. Yeah, so you need to add a server on the network. Let's see. So just add one server then. Oh, yeah. No, this one's a Meraki. This is the old one. This is the devices. All right. So, okay, we have physical, we have config, we have services. So first thing, we need to assign IP address to this server, right? So click on desktop. So now we're familiar with this portal, right? The terminal, you remember, we have used this tab now, one, right? This feature, the terminal. So now when I use this one, IP configurations. Okay. All right. So you can see we have two options, right? We have a DHCP. So if I click on DHCP, this server now will start looking for an IP address from the server, from the DHCP server, right? And then static, this is us manually assigning. So since this is a server, it's the server that's going to be used to communicate with the printer and stuff like that. So the IP address, we don't want the IP address of the server to change. So we're going to manually assign an IP address. So you can see on my side, my IP address of the server is already written at the top there. So before you set up your network, you need to what do you call write it down, right? Like there are so many tools that we can use to design our network. Draw it down and see how it is gonna look like. So for me, I use Packet Tracer to kind of like create my network, assign IP addresses, and see how is it going to communicate and stuff like that. So for now, I have written down the IP address of the server. So I want to apply it on the server now. 192.168.10.1. That's the IPv4. So I'm on IPv4. And then the subnet mask. Now the subnet mask is that /24. Automatically, once you click on the subnet mask box, it will give you an IP address, subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0. And then what is a gateway? So IPv4 address, it's a 10.1, right? 192.168.10.1. Subnet mask is a /24, which would be represented as 255.255.255.0. And then default gateway. What is a gateway? What's the other word for gateway? So we say the router, right? I can call it a gateway, right? So what's the IP address of the router? Here, since this server will want to connect to the internet, it needs to know who's responsible of connecting here to the internet, which is the router. So we need to type in the IP address of the router, which is 192.168. The IP address that we applied on that interface on the router, right? Yeah, the same one, 10.254. Right. It's complaining about something. What is it? Invalid gateway address. I did something wrong there. 192.168.10.254. Can't complain about that. I did something wrong there. All right, that's the default gateway. So we use the IP address we apply the IP address of the server on the router there. I mean the IP address of the gateway on the server. All right, the DNS server. Do we know what is a DNS? So, okay, DNS server stands for domain name service or domain name server. So the DNS, it's easy for us human beings to remember facebook.com, the domain names, right? But for computers, they use, last time we say they use digital numbers, right? Like ones, zeros, binary, right? So when I type in facebook.com, the system needs something else that can interpret that or convert that from a domain name into what? Into an IP address. So if I type in cook.com, the system will need to convert that into what? Into an IP address. So the DNS server, the role of a DNS server is to convert domain names into IP addresses. So if we don't have a DNS server on our network, then the devices, you will type in facebook.com and then it will say address not found, right? Can't reach the DNS. So let's configure DNS server. So since we have one server on our network, the DNS server, this server is going to be what? The DNS server. So 192.168.10.what? So he's going to be the DNS server. So a server, one server can be so many things, right? It can be a DNS server, can be a DHCP server, can be a file server, can be any print server, web server, can. So yeah. All right. Now, since we have populated that information there, we need to move to Services tab. Click on Services tab. So from Desktop tab, you don't have to save this one, right? Just leave it as it is. Services, and then look for DHCP service. So you can see one server can have all these services. Can be HTTP server, can be DHCP server, can be DNS systems, syslog, and all those. So now we want to configure DHCP server. Don't click DHCP v6, click the DHCP server. So we are configuring a DHCP on this server. So you can see there on services there is on and off. So by default it's off. So the first thing that we have to do is switch it on. I've seen most people they make a mistake of configuring the DHCP server and then they leave it off, and then now they go to devices. The devices start requesting for an IP address, and then they can't find the server and stuff like that. So first of all, switch on the services, and then we have the pool name. Remember, I told you that we have to create a pool. So the DHCP server will be issuing out IP addresses based on IP addresses coming from a certain pool that we have created. So pool name, let's say our company name is PBSL. So the pool name can be anything. Can be your name, yeah. And then the default gateway, what's the IP address of the default gateway? 192.168.10.254. And then DNS server, which is the IP address of the server, right? 192.168.10.1. So default gateway 192.168.10.254, DNS server 192.168.10.1. So now if we make a mistake on this part, that means all of the computers that are trying to get the IP address from the server will get the wrong information. Or sometimes they won't be able to even communicate with the server. They won't be able to reach the server. Right. So we have a DNS server configured. You see a start IP address. Let's change from 0 to 1. Start from 1. So this is the pool. Our pool starts from 1. And then maximum number of users can be 255, can be 254. Put it on 254. Okay, let me maximize that. And then what else do I want to change? The WLSC, we're going to use this one when we're configuring wireless network, right? Wireless network. And then now what we need is, okay, we need to add this network. So say add. And then save the network, right? So once you click on it, you can see the pool name PBSA, default gateway, there is the IP address of the router, the one that's going to take these devices out of their own, their local area network to the internet. And then DNS server, 192.168.10.1, which is the IP address of the DNS. And then start IP address, we said you want to start from 1, and then submask, and then maximum users are only 254. Right? So that is done there. You can minimize that. And then let me show you an example. Let me switch to my network. All right. So now let's say I'm on PC2. This is my PC, right? And then I click on PC2, and then you want to assign an IP address to this, or you want a DHCP server to assign an IP address to this PC. So you go to the desktop tab. There's config and then desktop tab, and then this is the part where we assign IP addresses. This is the part. So the terminal, now we know what is used for, and then the IP configuration we know is for assigning IP addresses to devices. If you want to assign IP address to any device, you go to this part, click on desktop and then IP configuration. So now I'm back to that option whereby there was two options, the DHCP, and then the static. So I don't want to manually assign an IP address to this device. I want the DHCP server to issue out an IP address to my device. So I click on what? DHCP. You see at the top there it says requesting IP address. And then information comes back, says DHCP request what? Successful. And then now it has an IP address at 10.2. So all the devices now on my network, if I connect anyone on my network, if they connect using an Ethernet cable, oh, by the way, I forgot to switch to this dialog box. Okay, let me switch to the dialog box. Switch to that one. Okay, switch,
I
come
can't
on. Yeah, now you can see, right?
I can't see
Okay,
anything
let
on
me
my
put on
side.
static, right? So you can see static, we say this is us administrators manually assigning an IP address, right? But this is a PC or a laptop, right? We want this IP address to change, like so it can receive an IP address from what? Can be assigned IP address by DHCP server. So click on it, requesting IP address, and then boom, it receives what?
Yes.
192.168.10.2. It is an IP address now, right? So that's how we can assign IP addresses to these devices. Click on any PC. Okay, let me switch any, yeah. And then from that specific PC, you can move to, let's say once you click the PC, there are tabs right at the top, which is physical, config, desktop. Click
When
on
did you
desktop.
click to get here? Which PC is this one?
Okay,
Or anyone? Okay.
click on JCP. Requesting IP address. So if you incorrectly configure your JCP server, you'll get an APIPA. So JCP failed, APIPA is being issued because there's something wrong with the server. Let's go back to the
Yeah, no,
server.
I got it.
Let's assign it amount to address first. 192.168.1. That's a root. Then it's called points. 192.168.2. Request 10, 12. Yes, 68, 10. Instruction services. So we do 10 to 254, 10 to 1, 255, then 254, 254, and then so just add the gateway space, and then a space is created now. So there's a space at the top. Add. So it's all about 192.168. Yeah. So now, if you want to assign to any device, so click any device, desktop, then IP, and then we have two options, DCP, click on DCP, because we don't want to multi-assign. So request me. Oh, tell me.
Ah, so I'm also learning.
What's up, okay.
You managed to. Okay, no, that's not my phone. I didn't just leave.
Oh, you need that thing. I know I forgot. I totally forgot. Yeah. But what I'll do, I'll check it today, right?
Okay,
And bring it.
I'll bring it.
I have a box there that I have so many chargers, then I can get
Oh,
one.
starting to print.
Yes, Jonas, I don't know what he's doing that using that phone.
Okay, Jim is gonna start it.
You want to give it a new color, you know?
That is interesting, dude.
Yeah, man. Like so, it's best like when you're using like the physical router. So you just create your own network using these physical routers.
Yeah.
We
So
call
in
it.
the olden days, you would have that whole window that would pop up.
Yeah.
So that's the actual window that you were busy with now.
Working on it.
They're
Yeah.
very simple. I know in the olden days, if you used your laptop, that's the window that actually popped up.
Yeah.
And then you had to call it. It did ask your system administrator for the password and whatnot.
And stuff. Yeah. So now it's easy now. Network has changed, man. Like they introduced like new technology, which makes managing your network very easy.
Yeah, you can do something.
Yeah.
Neat. I'm gonna tell this.
You have to. Bongega, did you manage to connect? All right. So now let's say it's 100. So automatically what happens now, let's say you have all these devices on your network, right? Automatically, once they connect to your network, for example, someone plugs in an Ethernet cable or they connect to your Wi-Fi network, what happens is automatically the devices they receive a mess, what do you call, they receive these IP addresses,
yes.
right?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine because we said start from one, right? So one was already assigned to the server. So he said, okay, the next available IP address is a two. So if you do the same thing with the next computer, it will assign a three, four going upwards and stuff like that. So
This is where I am
with
right
the
now.
DHCP server, right? The other thing that we're doing is we are avoiding what we call like the duplication, right? So we can't duplicate IP addresses, right? So we don't want to avoid two devices having what the same IP address. That's not allowed. But manually, yes, we can make that mistake. But with the DHCP server, it will
Okay.
always make sure that it doesn't duplicate IP addresses. For example, if it is assigned a .1 to any device, it knows that okay, the next available IP address is what? It's a 2. And then okay, 2 is gone, it removes it from the pool. It says okay, 3 is available now, and then it issues out all of those IP addresses to different devices. So that's the so those are the benefits of the DHCP server, right? So the DHCP server, we have the Microsoft, they have their own servers, right? They have like the Microsoft Server 2016, we have 20, no, it's 2019, 2008, 2012, the servers that we manage. So most
Yeah, it
companies,
actually
they
does.
might be using those servers, right? Maybe 2019, 2008, 2012, and then 20, yeah, there was 2016, I remember. There's 2016. So we're going to look at all of those types of servers because now we're focusing on Cisco. We're going to move from Cisco, look at Huawei, and then from Huawei we move to Microsoft. Microsoft, we're going to look at the cloud computing, right? I know most companies these days they've moved to Asia, right? So how to manage Asia, how to add users, how to create virtual machines and stuff like that on the network. Can you do it after one? Yeah. So Microsoft is something like that, right? Like the cloud computing. So we can start with there's a certificate called AZ900, right? That's the fundamentals to cloud computing. So how to create virtual machines. Last time we spoke about the virtual machines, whereby an organization might buy a virtual machine from Microsoft, and then we have like 20 people, all of them connecting to what? To that one device. What we need is only maybe a remote license from Microsoft to be able to connect all of those devices, which makes things easy for us. Right now, the companies don't have to buy expensive computers. They just buy a simple computer, and then we remotely connect to that virtual machine, and then we use that. But that virtual machine may be specifically for departments whereby they need bigger specs for their devices. Let's say for developers, and then other departments that what do you call graphic designers, developers, programmers. What are the other ones? There are other departments that really need higher specs in our organizations, right? So those guys, we can, instead of buying expensive laptops for everyone, we can just get one virtual machine from Microsoft. We build it, and then we connect everyone to that machine, right? So we're going to look at that, how to build a virtual machine, how to also the other important thing is the Active Directory. Once you are part of the technical support, you need to understand the Active Directory. Active Directory, we use it to create users, right? For example, the HR department have hired one person, and then we need to onboard that person to our network, right? So we have to create a username for them, and then create a password for them, and then also put them in different groups depending on their job role, what exactly are they going to be doing in our organization, and then we assign permissions, right? So if they're working for a bank, you find that okay, they're working for a bank, but there are certain softwares that they're not allowed to access. So we group people, we put them in different groups, and then we assign permissions to those groups. If this group is allowed to access maybe a software that approves loan, then we create a group, and then we put people in that group, we give them permission to approve loans, right? And then maybe there's another group that maybe help people out in terms of like maybe applying for loans, and then we just give them access to the software, but they don't have access to approving the loans, right? So we can create groups. Groups makes it easy to manage the users that we have in our network. So we're going to get into Active Directory. The problem is that the material that we have, it has so many assignments, right? Sometimes I try to cover the assignments and then not have some time to really look at what's happening in the industry right now. Because once you become a technician, you need to know these things. Okay, which tools are they currently using now in the industry? So things like Asia, things like Office 365, we need to look at things like that, right? Teams, okay, I see you guys, you are good with Teams, right? You fully understand Teams. Are you using Teams at work, like in terms of like, because Teams is bigger than this, right? Like bigger than conducting online meetings and stuff like that. It goes deeper than this. You use Teams at work. Right, so you guys are familiar with Teams, so it's fine. We're gonna skip Teams and then maybe look at something else, maybe the Office 365, right? So Teams comes in with channels whereby we can create groups, and then we assign permissions to the certain things like that, right? So now you see we can get rid of Active Directory and then use a different tool like Teams. But
I
okay, no, no,
use
no, we can't
Teams.
get rid of
Yeah.
Active Directory per se because Active Directory is more powerful than Teams, right? So Active Directory brings, yeah. I can't. Once I get rid of active, because the teams now, in order for us to have all those names and whatever emails and stuff like that, we would have created it using the Active Directory, and then now we just put it on the teams part. So the Active Directory is kind of like the heart of
Yeah, you need to press
the
the
organization. It
username to
sits
log in.
so Active again now, if we want to
Password.
what do you call
Yeah.
manage the computers that we have in our network, know the devices, number of devices we have in our network. I also need to put the devices on Active Directory and stuff like that. So to note, okay, where is the other
Yeah.
device and stuff? How many devices do I have? Okay, we have other softwares that we can bring in, manage engine and stuff like that. Okay, so there's so much to talk about, but back to Cisco. So we're going to look at all of the vendors, right? The popular vendors and then their popular devices. Because some vendors, they are popular maybe in one specific device or one specific software. So if that software is popular, then we look at that. And then if there are softwares that maybe you guys are using at work, that side, that we want us to go through, That would be interesting. I would love to go through that together in class and then see what are the features and then how do we integrate that specific software with the Cisco devices that we have, with the Microsoft device that we have, and stuff like that. Because the other thing that I've seen with different companies, right, they make mistake whereby they buy tools. Let's say you have Teams, right? You buy Teams, and then you have Teams, a license for Teams, and then after that you find people are buying a different tool again, and then they're paying for Teams, and then they're also paying for the other different tools. But when you look at those two tools, you find that they have the different features. Maybe Teams doesn't have one feature, and then they end up buying something else just because of that feature. The thing with Teams or Microsoft, they can customize these things for us. Like if our company is looking for a specific thing, they can just try to tweak it and then suit the company needs, right? So you find that most companies are paying a lot of money for two different tools that might be doing the same thing, so that maybe they're looking for one feature, then they end up buying a different tool. It happened here in our company, but I had to change everything. Say, okay, let's get rid of one because this software can do what that other software is doing. So we call that system analysis, right? You get into an environment and then you look at the devices that we have, we analyze it, okay, are we still needing this? Do we still need this specific system? Or it is become it's no use for us, right? So if we don't use it anymore, then we can remove it from our network. And then the other thing that most administrators forget is, let's say we have an employee that was working for PBSA and then they got fired or they resigned, right? They forget to remove those people from the Active Directory. Or sometimes it comes someone else who's doing contract for 3 months, right? With the contracts, when someone is doing 3 months, we have to put them as a guest, right? Knowing it, okay, we specify the time, how long are they going to be with us, right? If it's 3 months, then we say, okay, specify 3 months, and then after 3 months, that account expires, right? Then they are out of the network. So we have companies being hacked because of that. They forget to remove people from what? From their systems. And then the other part is the groups part. So privileged, we have a term. What's the term? Whereby we assign permission based on your job role. So if your job role is only for, let's say we're working for a bank, your job role is only for approving loans, right? We can't give one person the access to helping people to apply for loans, and then also they have access to what? To approving loans. So companies or cybersecurity, in a situation like that, we need to limit the power from one person, right? We can't give them the full power to the one system. If we do that, that person now can go ahead and then apply a loan or do something on the system and then approve everything, right? So we create something like this. Say, okay, there must be someone who does one, and then there must be someone who does the second thing. So you can't complete the whole task. Does it make sense? So if, let's see the example of the loans, right? Applying for a loan, maybe that specific software, we don't give you access to that part, and then we give someone else an access to what? Approving loans. Just an example, right? So we're trying by all means to giving you full access to the system. Because if you give one user a full access to the entire system, then they can defraud the company, right? So we try to break it down to say, okay, you can do one, and then there's someone else who must come in and what? And approve that. Even if it's a supervisor, somehow we don't give them full permissions unless if they come to the IT, even the IT department, right? We get audited like by what's the term for that? Yo, I forgot. It's been a while without doing cybersecurity. Okay, so there are terms that come in place whereby even us, the IT administrators, we get audited. They just tell you, to, okay, you have to go to leave, maybe 2 days, paid leave, or 2 days or 3 days. Then they bring in someone else to audit whatever you were doing, especially in an environment like a bank. The banks are so serious when it comes to security, right? Some other companies are lax when it comes to security. They don't even give you like a paid leave like for 2 days or 3 days. Back comes vacation. They can't do that. But the banks, if you are really the big guy there, they can take you out and then bring in someone else to come and audit you. Whatever you were doing in there, is it correct and stuff like that? Because administrators, most of the times, we give ourselves like full access to most of the things, right? Of which is one thing that we try to avoid. All right. So when it comes to IT, there's so much, right? So now let me switch back to Packet Tracer. Um, what do we have there? Okay, now we have a command called the ping command. So now we have configured these devices, but we're not sure if PC0 or PC2 is able to communicate with the router. So we need to test connectivity between two devices on command prompt. Okay, let me switch here. Let me click there and then command prompt. So you see where you find command prompt. So uh, you can see my screen. Let me switch. All right. So and then PC2, and then I'm on PC2. You see on desktop there is a part that says command prompt.
I can't see your screen.
Command prompt. Okay.
No.
On PC2, click on desktop. There's command prompt there. Yeah. Click on it. Right. So there's a command that we use to test connectivity between two devices. Right after configuring devices, right before you give it to anyone, you need to test your setup. Right, is it working fine? Everything is perfect. So we have a command that we use to test connectivity between two devices. So the command will be ping. Oh snap! ASCIIs. I keep forgetting that I have to switch to the dialog box. Where is it? Where is it? All right, I'm on the dialog box. So you can see my command prompt, right?
Please move to your
Ping,
other
and then
screen
the IP
now.
address of the router 192.168. So the command is ping, and then you type in the IP address of the device that you want to ping. So you want to test connectivity. So let's say now you're busy trying to print out something, right? But the printer is not printing anything. So you want to check if your printer and your device, the printer and your device,
Yes, I
laptop,
can. Thank
are they
you.
connected? Can they communicate? Something like that. So you type in ping and then the IP address of the device that you want to test connectivity with, 168.10.254. Enter. So you see now it says reply from. So that means there is connectivity. It says send 4 packets, received 4 packets, lost 0. So the ping command is used to test connectivity between devices. So we can use ping also for troubleshooting. If you want to troubleshoot, you can use ping. If you are thinking that okay, there's a problem maybe between two devices, you want to check if they're able to communicate, we type in ping. And then there's another command that we can use also mainly for troubleshooting. If you want to check your, let's say, if no ipconfig space slash o. So now ipconfig slash o. These are tools that we use for troubleshooting, just to check information about the device. Because some results after that. Oh, this one doesn't even have a trace first. So let's yeah. So now there mustn't be a request timeout.
I also got request timed out, but then after 4 times it came back and produced some state.
Now it's fine. You show me. So yeah. So if you want a command, you type in there, then when I bring it back, just use the up arrow, then bring the command instead of like typing it from. beginning to end. So just call it down. Okay, now let's type in another command, which is Bongega, on your side, what results do you get? The first ping on the router. Yeah, so that means there's a problem. That device is not able to communicate with the router. First, check if
Oh, which
that device
one?
has an IP address. I think it doesn't have an IP address, maybe.
Well, if I says timeout, timeout,
So how
timeout,
do we
timeout,
check
then
that
it
an
says
IP,
ping
a device has an IP
stats,
address?
then it
So you
has
can use
packet sent
either this
4,
command,
received 0, lost
ipconfig/all,
400% loss.
and then you see here it says IPv4 address. So type in ipconfig/all. If this part is blank, that means something is wrong. You have to assign an IP address. What's the IP address?
Okay.
And master, yeah, something is wrong.
It does have an IP
So it does have an
address.
IP address. What's the IP address?
It does get the results after timed out. It first says timed out, timed out, timed out, then it brings the results.
No, it's fine.
But I don't get the second one that says approximate round trip time. I don't get that.
JCP. All right, now it's fine because she used JCP.
It's 192.168.10.6.
What will be the problem now? Okay, can you see where is this? The default gateway IP address?
I remember I was
No,
assigning.
it won't show
I assigned 111.
So okay,
Yeah,
can you pull up
where
your
it
screen
auto
and see-
assigned on that DS something. Yes.
So IP address 10.6 default gateway. Okay, minimize this. Close the command prompt. Yeah, and then go to IP configuration. No. Yeah, just IP config. Yeah, everything looks fine there. And then, okay, close this one now.
Close it.
Wait, okay, go back. Which one were you pinging? Okay. Okay, click on it, and then go to command prompt. Command prompt. Let me see the IP address that you typed in. 192.168.10.254. Okay, try now. Let's see. Type in ping the device. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Tired of typing.
What should I try now? Do the ping again.
Request timed out.
Okay.
Let's see the second message.
Can you copy and paste on this thing?
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. Okay, something's wrong on the router there. Okay, minimize. Let's check the router now. Minimize this one.
See?
Go to the CLI.
Does it like 4 times before it then pulls
now go to view mode.
Then it pulls it out.
Yeah, use a view mode. Enter until enter.
What are we checking here?
Yeah. Enable. Yeah.
Where?
Show
Oh,
IP space int
and then user view mode
yeah
is
space interface brief. Yeah.
enabled. Né?
If I put it there, I can't see this. Let me just drag it this way. You can
Status
see gigabit Ethernet 0.
int
It
br.
says unassigned. So the router doesn't have an IP address. Ukushuta assign. Yeah.
Okay. Kanjani.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so config tab, right?
You see
And
now you're typing it on the wrong side now.
I'll do interface gig, which I think it is, let me see,
You're on the PC. Yeah.
0.0, right? Zero, whatever, slash 0.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll do
Yeah.
interface.
Gig. Yeah.
What do you mean? Oh,
So you see now you're inside the interface. Yeah.
I see. Now I'm on something else.
Yeah.
Okay. For interface, was it gig?
Yeah.
You are this command ne? Then enter.
Yeah. To check the IP address at the back.
Then I'll say put the IP
The IP
address.
address of the router is there. Is at the top of the router there.
So IP
On top of the
address.
router. 192. Yeah.
Now where I have to minimize, ne? Which is the, how do I,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh yes, ngiyayibona. Okay, wrong place.
Yeah.
Okay. So 192.168.
No, you need the 255s there.
10.254. Right? 255. Do I have to add this, right?
Yeah.
The 255, or do I just add the IP
Complaining about
address plain?
something. Our 255 sebabaningi.
Okay, 25.
But
And
but about
255.0. Right?
A shortcut is up arrow. Up
Then
arrow.
enter. Then
Press up arrow.
short bow 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there is
Yabona
nothing
lama arrow
moving.
lawa
So now I
u4
need to
lawa.
go
Press
back.
le up your yeah. So it bring back like yeah just did yeah 0. Try now. Let's see.
I'm looking for the up arrow on my thing.
Fine.
Okay,
So
I
now
see it. So it
there is
means
no
it's
need
gonna be
for no
shift.
shutdown because
No.
your interface is already green, right? So you need to exit and then go back to user view mode. So
Can
to
I
check
delete?
if the router has taken the IP configuration, you have assigned the IP config. If you have assigned IP on the interface, so exit until you are on user view. Yeah. Now, because the show running config, it will populate all the information. We don't want that. We want the show IP interface brief, because when I see information about all the IP
Exit
interfaces.
again.
No, you are inside user view mode. Once you see the pound
This
sign,
is
just know that you
the
are
first
on.
one.
Yeah, the global mode. Int
Don't I need to go
shortcut is
enable first here?
int. Yeah, brief. Yeah.
One count. Oh, then config is
Assign
the
and then status up. Okay. So let's
okay,
go back to
it's the
that
global
PC that we're
mode.
using to ping a router.
Okay, so I'll run show
We can close this one.
IP.
We're done. Yeah.
So there I see now it's assigned here. Can I close this? We're trying to ping now.
Yeah, it's fine. No subnet mask, just the IP address.
We're
There we
running
go.
ping.
So that's how we troubleshoot, right? Yeah, I go back to
192.
that means you're doing it at the wrong platform there. That's why every time, right,
Is
when we
that the
run any
query?
configurations, we have to go back and then type in show running config to check that the configurations that you just created now,
Thank
do they
you.
apply on that specific interface or on the
But
correct
I
interface.
didn't do it because I had done it.
So you have to check every
I don't
time once
understand.
you're done. All right, so now we know that there's connection. So you can run ping on all of the devices to make sure that they communicate. So my other PC, the problem is that they didn't have IP addresses. So first make sure that they have an IP address assigned by the DHCP. Let me go to all devices, request for IP address. Desktop IP config. So all of my devices now have IP address. Oh, you have to. Shoot. No, I was just like, my devices, they didn't have IP addresses. So now what I was doing is I was just going through them and then requesting IP address from the server. So I only requested IP address from the DHCP
I'm not sure
server
if you're doing
for one
something on your
device, but
screen, but I
now
can't see
all
it.
of them, they have the DHCP server. All right, this is the next number, yeah. Yeah. So only one device had the IP address. So now all of them, they have the IP address. So we have another important thing, right? We have a protocol called file transfer protocol. So let's say you want to upload or download a file from a server, right? So we want to go through how to
Yeah, the one
configure
where it just
FTP.
adds the next
So
number.
FTP can be configured on a server. So now we want to go back to the server and then configure an FTP. All right. So go back to the server, click on the server. All right, I'm on the server now. What am I looking for? Services again, right? Because this server is an IP address, the DHCP server is configured. So now I want to go to FTP server. Click on FTP server. So go to the server 0, and then under services, click FTP server 0, and then under services tab, click on FTP. By default, FTP is switched on. And then down here, these are the files that are on the server by default. But if you want to upload your own file, you can do that. But these are the files that have been uploaded on this server, right? But first, before we access that, we need to have a username and a password, right? So let's create our username. So we are the administrators at PBSA. So they've requested that we create username for 2 people that will be able to download files and upload files on the server. And then they specifically told us that these people need full permissions. Permissions, we're talking about right? You have a permission to write to a document, you have a permission to read the document, you have a permission to delete, rename, and list. So we want to create 2 users that will be able to connect to this FTP server and then upload and then download files from this server. So username, let's create, can be anything. On my side, I'm going to create admin, password, give it a password. Don't forget to give them the full permissions, because if they don't have full permissions, they'll be restricted. So write, read, delete, rename, and list the document. And then add that user. You can see the user is added. And then I add another user. And then I give them full permissions. And then just add the user there. So we have 2 users, right? We're creating. All right. So now, once we're done with that, let's just close this box. And then we want to use a PC, because these people will be using a PC to remotely connect to the FTP server, right? So let's go to that PC, the PC that we use to ping the router, right? That's the same PC, or you can use any PC. But first, before we connect to that, let's ping the server, because I want to connect to the server. But I'm sure this device is able to communicate with the server because already it received an IP address from the server. So I'm just doing like the due diligence or something like that to check if everything is fine before I start working on it. 10.1, ping that, okay, fine, they communicate properly. All right. So there's connection between the two. Now, I need to FTP to this server. So FTP and then the IP address of the server. 192.168.10.1. That's the IP address of the server. Enter. And then say trying to connect to that server connected to welcome to PT FTP server username. We created 2 usernames, right? You still remember the username? What is their password? If you don't have a password, then you won't be able to connect. So you see now it changes to FTP. Before it was what? C drive. Now I'm inside the server now. Are we all inside the server? You must remember the password that you created. Okay, so type in FTP then. FTP. Yes, FTP. No such account. So now the hackers usually what they're looking for is the usernames that have full permissions to most of the resources in the company. So once they get that username, then it gives them full access to all of the resources. So for security reasons, right? Like that's why I said we can't give maybe one person the entire access to all of the resources that we have. We kind of like limit them so that even if someone get hold of their account, the damage will be like not that much, right? Because they access small resources, not the entire resources in our network. Yeah. So I forgot the FTP commands though. Okay, let's say now I want to. Okay, let's say you forgot the commands. Type in a question mark, enter. So you can see the different commands there that we have. So the CD is for changing directory, right? So let's say you're moving from one file to another or from one folder to another folder. And then delete definitely is for deleting the file. dir directory is for displaying the files that are on this machine. So this is the command that we're going to use to display files that are on this machine. And then get is for downloading. If you want to download a file from a server, you type in get space the name of the file that you want to download. And then help, yeah, you're struggling, and then you need that. Passive, there's passive mode on, I forgot that what it means. And then put is to upload a file to a server, right? So you're putting a file to a server. PWD, print working directory. You want to know where you are. For example, PWD, it says FTP is the current working directory, right? You want to know where you are. And then directory, dir, you see, these are the files that are on this server. So now if I want to access this file, I want to download this file. Let me say copy. Let me say get. Get, we say it is the command to download. And then paste that file there. It says reading file, what from, and then file transfer in progress. So this is what the hackers do, right? File transfer protocol, I think is no longer secure. It's not secure anymore, right? It's not used by most people. So this is what they do. They get into your server and then they use maybe things like FTP to download files from, let's say this is a proprietary document, right? This document is very sensitive. It's for, it keeps company proprietary information. So now people can use FTP to download the files from your organization. But we have tools that we can use to detect that. If any file is being downloaded from our server, there are tools that can report to us, okay, there's a download going on now. Yeah. So now it says file transfer in progress. Okay, the file is big. So what we can do is type in dir to show the files that are on your machine. And then look for a smaller file. This side, I think, is the size of the file. This stands for the size of the file. So look for a smaller file. Mine is big. So where do you think this file goes to when you're downloading it? Straight to your computer, right? from the server to your computer. Yeah. And then when we're uploading it, we're going to be taken from your computer back to the server stuff like that. Yeah. So are you guys downloading a file there? Mine is
To the
for
computer.
them.
Yeah.
You want to download or you want to display the files. So if you want to display or see, so you said what
What's the command for the
you have
files?
displayed already. Okay, type in dir.
The command to get the files first.
dir for directory. It will display all of the files there, and then just choose one file.
Well, I want to download.
So mine, it is
Let's
done. It says
download.
copied.
I haven't
Five,
displayed
I don't know what
or
is 5,000 or bytes. That's the size of the files.
nope.
Your question was, what's the file? What's the command to get files from the server? So the command will be get
Okay.
space and then the name of the file.
Okay, and just to download.
Is it downloading?
Okay. Yes, it is. File transfer in progress.
So you want to display everything. Yeah. dir. So just the dir. So directory. So okay. Displays everything. So if you want to download, you type in get. Okay. Which is any file you want. Then there's no one. Yeah. Just download them. Just copy the name of the file. Yeah, that. It is someone. Let's put the column. Okay, so you just copy so you read it. Okay. So control C. And then get. The command to download get. Before paste, type in get first. Get first. Yeah. Get first. No. Get. Oh. I think that's the command, right? Yeah, can you? Yeah. And then paste that. Okay. You can paste it in. But not to remove the code, I think we're going to have a problem with this code. Which one? File transfer in progress. So we're downloading a file, but we have tools in place to detect things like this. If there's any file that is being downloaded, I need to know. And then the size of the file and then how sensitive the file, I need to know that. So we have tools that monitor all that. Yeah, so that's how you steal information. So most companies, okay, back in the day, but now they don't do this anymore. They would create like the FTP usernames and then find out, okay, there's no one who's using it, but they created full permissions for this. And they just leave it like that. So if the hackers will be looking for accounts like that. If an organization is an account like that, and then there are sensitive documents in a server, we just download. But there are so many tools that can detect any download from the network, so it can pick it up. But if they make sure that it looks normal to the system, if the system says or thinks, okay, this is a normal download, everyday download, then it won't pick it up. So it won't, like, they will just get the file without you noticing what happened there. All right, on my side is still downloading. Okay, that's it. So 1 hour break. So we're done for today. I think just you have to go through that module one together after lunch, right? And then Bongela, you said you are good with the communication one, right? If you need anything, then you can shout. I think we're done for today, Bongela, right? Oh, she disconnected. I still connected. Bongela. Uh, yeah, like so we're gonna dive deep into networking, and then once we feel like we're okay with the Cisco, then we move to Huawei, which is the networking also.
Oh,
But
sorry.
it will be easy when we move into
I've
Huawei
been
because
talking.
it will be like
I
just
was
the commands that
muted.
are changing, right?
Okay, no
But the
problem. I'm
protocol will
asking
still be
what's
the
happening
same. Then once
tomorrow.
we're done
Are we
with comfortable
doing?
with
Are we
networking,
continuing with
then
networking?
we need things like cloud computing, Active Directory, all those things, right? So no, next week I have another group coming in. So yeah, tomorrow, yeah, we continue from where we left off. Like tomorrow, so there are other things that we can do tomorrow with this thingy, with the packet tracer. There's so many protocols we can work
All
on.
of those things tomorrow. Or are we moving to next week as well now?
So we're doing that tomorrow. All right, sharp.
So all of this will be done tomorrow.